You shouldn't leave your hair down when you walk to your car. Someone could grab it, just like that. The man said it so calmly, like he was commenting on the weather. But we were alone in a convenience store at 2 a.m., and I'd never told him where I parked. That is when I realized he'd been watching me for weeks. And the Polaroid photo I found on my counter 3 days later, it proved he'd been closer than I ever imagined. My name's Hannah. I am 26 years old, and I am about to tell you how a stranger turned my quiet night shift job into a living nightmare that still haunts me today. If this story sends chills down your spine, hit that subscribe button, because what happened next gets so much worse. Until last month, I worked the night shift at a tiny convenience store off Route 58 in western Kentucky, the kind of place with flickering fluorescent lights, microwavable burritos, and a back room that always smells like old cardboard, no matter how much air freshener you use. I took the job because it was quiet, predictable. I thought it would be easy money while I finished community college. Then I learned what it feels like to be truly watched by someone who thinks you don't notice. It started on a slow Wednesday night around 12:45 a.m. I was stocking the refrigerated sodas when the front door chimed. I didn't even bother looking up. I just called out, "Evening?" like I always do, but the guy didn't say anything back. When I turned around, he was already standing near the counter, way too close to my register for someone who hadn't picked anything out yet. He looked maybe late 40s, wiry build, grayish stubble. He wore a windbreaker zipped up to his neck, even though it was humid outside. He gave me this soft smile, like he knew me, and said, "You work this shift a lot." It wasn't a question. "Yeah," I said carefully. "Most nights." He nodded like that confirmed something. I figured. I waited for him to buy something. Instead, he walked the aisles slowly, hands clasped behind his back like he was inspecting a museum exhibit. He'd glance at me every couple seconds, not even subtle about it. I pretended to check the lottery machine just so I didn't have to make eye contact. Finally, he came to the counter with a single pack of gum. He laid it down but kept his fingers resting on it. "It is Hannah, right?" My stomach dropped. I wasn't wearing a name tag. "Oh yeah," I said. "How'd you know that?" He shrugged. "I listen, you answered the phone the same way every night." Then he mimicked my greeting, my exact tone. And something inside me clenched like someone had grabbed the nerves in my spine. Before I could say anything else, he added, "You seem like the type who pays attention to details. That is rare." Then he paid in cash and walked out. I tried to shake it off. Creepy customers aren't exactly rare, but something about him stuck with me. The way he talked like we had an established relationship. Like this wasn't the first time he'd watched me. Over the next couple weeks, he kept showing up randomly. Not every day. Not enough for me to feel like I had proof of anything, but often enough that when the door chimed after midnight, I'd freeze, praying it wasn't him. Sometimes he'd wander the aisles without buying anything. Sometimes he'd stand near the back freezers, pretending to read labels but staring at my reflection in the glass doors. And if you think that is disturbing, just wait. Drop a comment below with how you would have handled this situation, because I clearly didn't see what was coming. Once, when no other customers were around, he said, "You shouldn't leave your hair down when you walk to your car. Someone could grab it." Just like that. Calm. Observational, not advice. A diagnosis. Another time, he pointed at the store's security camera and said, "That one never records audio. Thought you knew that." I didn't. He knew things he shouldn't know. One night around 2 a.m., I had to take out the trash. We usually do it in pairs, but my coworker called out sick, and I was alone. The dumpster was behind the building, practically in the woods. I propped the back door open with a crate like we're trained to do. When I turned the corner, I saw a shape, a person standing halfway between the dumpster and the tree line, frozen facing me. The windbreaker, I dropped the trash bag. Bottles clattered across the pavement. He didn't move. "Just watch me," I whispered. "You can't be back here." Nothing. My hand shook so badly, I could barely grip my phone when I stepped backward toward the door. He took one small step forward. Like he was matching me, I bolted inside and slammed the door. I didn't stop shaking for an hour. I didn't even finish the trash run. I called my manager the next morning, she told me. Just call the cops next time. Some people are harmless but weird. Harmless. Yeah, sure. The next few nights. He didn't come in. I almost convinced myself it was over. I was wrong. The real turning point happened on a Monday around 1:30 a.m. The store was empty. I was scrolling through the register's catalog system, bored out of my skull, when I saw movement outside. A silver sedan parked sideways across two spaces. Headlights off. The shape of someone sitting inside, not moving. I thought about calling the sheriff's office, but I kept telling myself I was being dramatic. As long as he didn't come inside, what could I even report? 10 minutes passed, then 20. The figure didn't move. Finally, a trio of guys in their 20s came in. Construction workers heading home from a late shift. One of them, a tall guy in a Cincinnati Reds hoodie, said, "Hey, you know, there is someone in that car just staring this way." I swallowed hard. "What car?" He pointed. "End of the lot. Engines running." My heart dropped. Then he added, "Kind of looks like he is talking to someone in the back seat." My blood froze. Back seat. There was no someone back there. Not that night. Not the night behind the dumpster. He always came alone. Unless he didn't. The guy saw my expression and got serious real fast. One asked, "Is he bothering you?" "He has been coming around a lot," I said quietly. "Too much." All three exchanged a look. The one in the hoodie said, "We'll hang around a minute." They went outside with their coffees, stood near their truck. Casual but clearly waiting. The car suddenly backed up fast and sped out of the lot. No headlights. No license plate visible. Just gone. Smash that like button if you think those construction workers might have just saved my life, because what I found 3 days later proved this guy was far more dangerous than I realized. When I got home at 6 a.m., I cried in my driveway like an idiot, not from sadness. From that awful adrenaline crash you get after something almost goes very, very wrong. I kept replaying everything he'd ever said. "You shouldn't leave your hair down." I listen. "That camera doesn't record audio. You work this shift a lot." He wasn't just curious, he was gathering information. I wish I could say that was the last I saw of him, but the following Friday, something happened that still makes me sick when I think about it. It was 12:10 a.m. A woman came in with her kid, maybe 4 years old, half asleep in her arms. She grabbed milk and some Tylenol. Normal night when she left. I noticed something on the counter that hadn't been there before. A Polaroid photo of me, taken from outside the store window. I was facing the register in the picture, looking down, completely unaware. Across the bottom edge, someone had written in neat, tiny handwriting, "I pay attention too. I quit." The next morning, my manager asked if I wanted to file a police report. I tried, but there wasn't a name, a license plate, or anything concrete to point to, just a pattern of behavior that made my skin crawl. Now I work day shifts at a hardware store 2 towns over. I cut my hair. I changed my phone number. I park under the security camera every night. But even now, sometimes when I stop at a red light and glance into the rearview mirror, I swear I see a silver sedan 3 or 4 cars back. If this story gave you chills, do me a favor. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next story is even more terrifying, trust me on this one. I watched the security footage 3 times before I believed what I was seeing. A hand, pale, thin, definitely human, slowly sliding out from under the front desk where I'd been standing just minutes before. Fingertips pushing a brochure across the lobby floor while I sat alone in the back office. Someone had been hiding under that desk the entire time, watching my feet, listening to me breathe, waiting. "My name is Joel. I am 28 years old, and what happened during my overnight shift at a remote Montana lodge still makes me check under furniture before I sit down. Subscribe now if you want to hear how this night went from strange to absolutely terrifying. I worked the overnight shift at a small roadside lodge in rural Montana. It is not a chain, just a 2-story building from the late 70s with faded floral carpets, a lobby fireplace no one's allowed to use anymore, and a vending machine that eats dollar bills like it is hungry for them. I only took the night shift because it is quiet. Most nights, the only sounds are the wind hitting the siding and the old ice machine clunking, like it is dying in slow motion. I usually sit in the back office, drink terrible coffee, and watch reruns on the tiny television we keep on top of the filing cabinet. I know every sound this building makes, which is what made that Tuesday night so terrifying. It was sometime around 2:10 a.m. I was in the back office scrolling through my phone when I heard the soft chime of the front desk bell. Someone had pressed it. I set my phone down and walked out to the lobby expecting a late arrival or a guest with a question, but the lobby was empty, totally still. The bell at the desk swayed slightly, as if someone had just lifted their hand off it. I looked out through the glass doors. Nothing. No headlights on the highway. No new cars in the lot. The wind wasn't strong enough to shake the bell. And anyway, it wasn't one of those cheap ones that ring from vibration. You had to press it. Still, I tried to shrug it off. I told myself a guest might have leaned on the counter too hard and triggered it. I waited a moment, looked around, then went back to the office. 10 minutes later, the bell rang again. This time, the sound was sharper, deliberate. I walked out faster. Again, nobody. Except something was different. The guest key rack behind me, the one mounted on the wall, had a key card dangling crookedly. Room 204. It hadn't been like that before. I reached out and straightened it with my fingertips, then I heard it. A soft clicking sound from the hallway leading to the guest rooms. Click, pause. Click like someone tapping their fingernail on the wall. Slow, rhythmic. I stood there listening, barely breathing. Click. Then silence. I took a step toward the hallway, and the air felt colder. The lights didn't reach all the way down, leaving the far end in dull darkness. Hello? I called out. Nothing. I turned around, went back to the desk, and tried to convince myself it was just the building settling. The building doesn't settle in a perfect rhythm. Comment below if you would have investigated that sound, or if you would have run, because what I found on the security cameras next will haunt me forever. At around 3 a.m., the bell rang again. But this time, I heard something else with it. A scrape. Not loud. Just the faint sound of something dragging gently across the floor. I stepped out of the office. My stomach dropped. On the carpet in front of the desk was a hotel brochure, opened face down. I hadn't seen it there before. I always keep that rack neat. I slowly crouched and picked it up. Someone had folded one corner, like they'd been keeping their place in a tourist brochure about local hiking trails in the middle of the night. What the hell? I whispered. I stood, looked around the lobby, and felt the hairs on my arms rise. The air smelled different suddenly, not like the sterile cleaning spray we use. Warmer, like someone had breathed out recently. I decided to check the cameras. I hurried into the back office, shut the door, and turned on the old monitor. The feed flickered a little, but the lobby camera came into view. The brochure was there on the floor, but the moment I watched the playback, my blood turned to ice. The brochure didn't fall. It slid slowly into the frame, like someone had pushed it from under the counter. I rewound, zoomed in a little. That is when I saw it. A hand. Not the whole thing. Just fingertips slipping up from the shadow under the desk, nudging the edge of the brochure forward. Pale, thin, definitely human. My breath stopped. Someone was under the desk, had been under the desk long enough to adjust the keycard, ring the bell, slide the brochure out. I forced myself to look at the live feed of the lobby. Nothing there now. But that didn't make me feel better. It made it worse. Because if they weren't under the desk anymore, just one tap. I spun around so fast the chair nearly fell over. I didn't breathe, didn't speak, didn't move. Seconds passed. I lifted my shaking hand and slowly locked the office door. Then I backed away, keeping my eyes on the door as I picked up the phone and dialed 911. My voice shook so badly, the dispatcher kept asking me to repeat myself. If you are watching this alone at night right now, hit that like button. You are braver than I was, because it gets worse. As I waited for the officers, I stared at the monitors. Nothing happened for at least 2 minutes. Then, movement. The camera facing the front lobby showed someone walking slowly past the desk. Hood up. Hands and face angled down like they had all the time in the world. Like they weren't hiding anymore. They walked toward the front door but didn't try to leave. They just stood there and looked outside. Then they leaned forward, pressing their forehead to the glass like they were fogging it up with their breath. Then they turned abruptly and walked out of frame. Toward the hallway, toward the office, toward me. I held the phone against my ear like a lifeline. I hear footsteps, I whispered. They're coming down the hall. The dispatcher said officers were close. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. There was no attempt to get in. Instead, I heard something else. Breathing, right against the door. Slow, measured. Too calm, I covered my mouth, trying not to make noise. The breathing stopped, silence. Then the soft sound of footsteps moving away. When I looked back at the monitor, the hallway was empty. The lobby was empty. The front doors were closed. For a second, I thought maybe they left. Then headlights filled the parking lot. The police. I stayed locked in the office until they shouted that it was safe to come out. They searched the entire building. Every room, every closet, every crawl space. Even behind the vending machine where a kid once got stuck years ago. They didn't find anyone. Not a footprint in the snow outside. Not a smudge mark on the front door glass. Nothing. But when they checked under the front desk, they found something tucked deep against the back panel. A crumpled guest receipt from 1997, a piece of gum wrapper, and a hotel key from the old metal key era. Before electronic cards, room 204. The room that had been vacant, the room whose key card had been nudged earlier that night. The officers bagged the items, shrugged, and said whoever it was must have slipped out before they arrived. But I watched the doors the whole time. No one left. Not through the front. Not through the side exit. Not through the back. They were in here, and then they weren't, like they dissolved into the building. I gave my 2 weeks the next morning. I still hear that soft bell sound in my head sometimes. The one someone pressed while hiding 3 feet from where I worked. And every time I think about room 204's key card hanging crooked on the rack like an invitation, I get this awful feeling. Whoever was inside that lobby wasn't roaming randomly. They were choosing a room. Waiting. And the only reason I am able to tell this story is because they picked the wrong moment to come out from under that desk. If these stories kept you up at night, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Because I've got more true horror stories coming your way. Sweet dreams. If you can sleep after this,